Blood on a marble floor does not stain if you wipe it fast enough. Daniela used to scrub floors for minimum wage, while a cruel boss mocked her weight. Tonight, she stands over that same boss, wearing a custom designer gown, while the most dangerous don in Chicago holds her hand. The storm battering the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Gold Coast penthouse did nothing to drown out the shrill, venomous voice of Celeste Stahl. Celeste was a woman built on sharp angles, starvation diets, and inherited wealth. She ran one of the most lucrative, high-end art auction houses in Chicago, a legitimate front that washed millions of dollars for the city's worst criminals. And tonight, the penthouse was prepped for the most dangerous of them all. Daniela Barbieri kept her head down, her hands raw from chemical cleaners as she scrubbed the grout near the grand fireplace. Her uniform, a drab grey dress, clung tightly to her plus-size frame, a fact Celeste never let her forget. Daniela was 24, carrying the soft, full curves of a woman who loved baking and hated skipping meals, but beneath her warm exterior was a mind sharper than broken glass. She had been 2 semesters away from an advanced degree in forensic accounting when her father passed away, leaving her buried in medical debt. Now, she was a maid. "Hurry up, you lumbering cow," Celeste snapped, adjusting the diamond tennis bracelet on her bony wrist. "Mr. Moretti will be here in 10 minutes, and if he sees you sweating on my imported rugs, I will take it out of your pathetic paycheck. Put the ledgers back in the safe once you finish dusting the mahogany desk, and try not to knock anything over with those hips." Daniela swallowed the sharp retort burning on her tongue. "Yes, Ms. Stahl." She pushed herself up from the floor, her knees aching. She walked over to the heavy oak desk where Celeste had carelessly left the private auction ledgers open. As Daniela reached for a dusting cloth, her eyes naturally gravitated toward the columns of numbers. She could not help it. Numbers spoke to her. They formed patterns, telling stories of greed, deceit, and theft. Within 3 seconds of scanning the open page, Daniela froze. The offshore transfer routing codes were mismatched. Celeste was skimming off the top. A staggering $5 million had been diverted from the primary laundering channel into a dummy account in the Cayman Islands. Celeste was stealing from the Moretti crime family. Before Daniela could process the sheer danger of this discovery, the heavy oak doors of the penthouse swung open. The air in the room dropped 10 degrees. Santo Moretti stepped inside. He was the don of the modernized Chicago outfit, a man whose name was whispered with equal parts reverence and terror across the eastern seaboard. Santo was 32, ruthlessly handsome with dark, predatory eyes, a sharp jawline dusted with a shadow of a beard, and a tailored black suit that barely contained the broad, lethal build of a street brawler turned king. Flanked by 2 heavily armed capos, he radiated an aura of absolute dominance. "Ah, Santo, darling," Celeste cooed, instantly transforming from a tyrant into a sycophant. She glided across the room, offering him a crystal glass of bourbon. Santo ignored the glass. His dark eyes bypassed the glittering skyline, bypassed Celeste, and landed directly on Daniela, who was standing frozen near the desk. Daniela clutched the dusting cloth, her heart hammering against her ribs. She felt the heavy, suffocating weight of Santo's gaze. It was not a look of disgust, which she was used to from the elite crowds in this building. It was a look of intense, clinical calculation, mixed with a flash of something dark and primal. Celeste noticed the Don's distraction, and her face flushed with fury. "Daniela," she screeched, "what are you doing hovering over my private documents? I told you to clean, not snoop, you stupid fat girl." Daniela flinched at the cruelty, but she did not lower her eyes. "I was just putting them away, Ms. Stahl. You were leaving grease stains on my paperwork," Celeste hissed, marching over and snatching the ledger from the desk. "This is what I get for hiring trash from the South Side. You are completely useless, clumsy, slow, and a glaring eyesore. Get out." "Miss Stahl, I need this job," Daniela said, her voice steady despite the humiliation burning her cheeks. "You are fired," Celeste spat, throwing a crumpled $100 bill at Daniela's feet. "Take your garbage bags and leave before I have building security throw you out. I will not have my guests subjected to the sight of a pathetic, bloated maid." Silence stretched across the massive room. Daniela looked down at the money on the floor, but she did not pick it up. Her pride was all she had left. She squared her shoulders, lifted her chin, and looked Celeste dead in the eye. "I may be a maid," Daniela said softly, her voice carrying a quiet, unbreakable dignity. "But at least I know how to balance a ledger without making a $5 million mistake on line 4. Celeste went completely pale. "What did you just say?" Daniela turned on her heel and walked toward the servants' elevator, her head held high. She did not look back. She did not see the sheer panic that seized Celeste's face. More importantly, she did not see the slow, dangerous smile that spread across the face of Santo Moretti. The freezing Chicago wind cut through Daniela's thin wool coat like a knife. She stood on the corner of Michigan Avenue, shivering, waiting for a night bus that was already 20 minutes late. Tears of frustration finally pricked her eyes, but she angrily wiped them away. She was jobless, she was broke, and she had just exposed a powerful woman's embezzlement in front of a mafia boss. She was likely going to wind up dead in the Chicago River. The squeal of tires snapped her out of her spiraling thoughts. A sleek, bulletproof black SUV pulled up to the curb, splashing freezing puddle water onto her worn boots. The back door swung open, revealing the plush leather interior. "Get in," a deep, gravelly voice commanded. Daniela peered into the darkness of the cabin. Santo Moretti sat in the back, nursing a glass of amber liquid. His massive frame took up most of the space. "No, thank you," Daniela said, clutching her purse to her chest. "I am waiting for the bus." Santo tilted his head, his dark eyes locking onto hers. The streetlights caught the sharp angles of his face, highlighting a small, faded scar that cut through his left eyebrow. "Daniela," he said, his voice dropping an octave, slipping into a dangerously soft register. "Do not make me ask twice. Get in the car. It is freezing, and you are shivering." The quiet authority in his voice left no room for argument. Swallowing her fear, Daniela climbed into the SUV. The heavy door shut with a solid thud, sealing her in a soundproof world that smelled of rich leather, expensive cologne, and gunpowder. Santo poured a second glass of bourbon and held it out to her. "Drink. It will warm your blood." She took it with trembling hands, taking a small sip. The liquor burned a fiery trail down her throat. "Why are you here?" she asked, refusing to cower. "Are you going to kill me because I saw your financial records?" Santo chuckled, a dark, rich sound that vibrated in the confined space. "Kill you? Tesoro, you just saved the Moretti family $5 million. You looked at a page of complex offshore accounts for 3 seconds and found a discrepancy my entire team of high-paid accountants missed." He leaned closer, the heat of his body radiating toward her. She felt absurdly self-conscious. She was drenched in cold sweat, wearing a hideous maid uniform, taking up too much space on the seat. But Santo was not looking at her with pity or disgust. He was looking at her like a starving man who had just found a feast. Celeste Stahl is currently being detained by my men in her penthouse, Santo continued calmly. She is crying, begging, and admitting to everything. She thought she could steal from the outfit. She was wrong. But I am not interested in her right now. I am interested in the brilliant woman she treated like dirt. He reached out, his large, calloused fingers gently brushing a stray lock of wet hair behind Daniela's ear. The touch was so tender it made Daniela gasp. "You have a gift, Daniela," Santo said, his gaze dropping to her full lips before meeting her eyes again. "And I do not let gifts go to waste. You are done scrubbing floors. You are coming to work for me." "Work for the Mafia?" Daniela asked, her breath catching. "Doing what? Finding the rats," Santo said simply. "You will be my personal auditor, my shadow. You will have full access to the syndicate's finances. You report only to me." The SUV glided through the iron gates of a sprawling, heavily guarded estate in Lake Forest. Daniela stared out the window at the towering stone mansion. It was a fortress. When the car parked, one of Santo's capos opened the door. Daniela stepped out, feeling utterly out of place. As she walked up the stone steps, a low-level guard stationed near the entrance gave her a slow, mocking once-over. "This the new cleaner, boss?" the guard sneered, looking at Daniela's curves with blatant disrespect. "Looks like she ate the last one." The air around them instantly froze. Daniela looked down, shame rushing back in a familiar wave, preparing to endure the mockery she had faced her whole life. But the mockery never came. Santo moved with terrifying speed. In a fraction of a second, he crossed the space, grabbed the guard by the throat, and slammed him against the stone pillar of the mansion. The sickening crack of the man's skull hitting the stone echoed in the quiet night. Santo did not pull a weapon. He did not need to. His bare hands were lethal enough. He squeezed the guard's throat, lifting the grown man inches off the ground. The guard clawed at Santo's iron grip, his face turning purple, his eyes bulging with terror. "Listen to me very carefully," Santo whispered, his voice a lethal hiss that carried across the courtyard. Every soldier in the vicinity froze, watching their don dispense brutal discipline. "This woman is Daniela Barbieri. She is under my personal protection. You will speak to her with the same respect you show me. If I ever hear you or anyone else make a comment about her body, her clothes, or her presence, I will carve out your tongue and feed it to the dogs. Do you understand?" The guard choked out a pathetic, gargling sound of agreement. Santo dropped him in a heap on the pavement. "Clean yourself up." "You sicken me," Santo spat, straightening his suit jacket as if he had merely swatted a fly. He turned back to Daniela. The murderous rage in his eyes vanished the second he looked at her, replaced by a fierce, burning protectiveness that made Daniela's pulse race. He extended his hand to her. "Come inside, Daniela," Santo said softly. "You are home now." Daniela looked at his outstretched hand. She knew taking it meant stepping into a world of violence, crime, and unimaginable danger. But as she looked at Santo Moretti, the first man who had ever truly seen her, the first man to defend her honor without hesitation, she knew she could not walk away. She placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm, possessive, and unyielding. As he led her through the massive oak doors of the syndicate's headquarters, Daniela realized her life as a discarded pawn was over. The Don had just crowned his new queen. 6 months had passed since the storming night Daniela Barbieri left a bucket of dirty water in a Gold Coast penthouse and stepped into the bloody, opulent world of the Chicago outfit. In that time, the landscape of the city's underworld had quietly but drastically shifted, and the epicenter of that earthquake was a 24-year-old woman who loved pastries, possessed a terrifyingly brilliant mind, and now commanded the absolute loyalty of the most dangerous men in the Midwest. Daniela sat behind a massive mahogany desk in her private office at the Lake Forest estate. She was no longer wearing drab, ill-fitting Maid uniforms. Santo had flown in a master tailor from Milan specifically for her. Today, she wore a deep emerald wrap dress made of heavy silk that perfectly hugged her full hips and soft stomach, draping elegantly over her curves. She looked like a Renaissance painting brought to life, a stark contrast to the hollowed-out, surgically altered socialites of Celeste Stahl's world. More importantly, she felt powerful. The capos and soldiers of the Moretti family no longer looked at her with skepticism or mockery. They called her Lament, the Mind. They had learned very quickly that crossing Daniela meant facing the unholy wrath of their Don, but they had also learned that her brain was their greatest asset. Within her first month, Daniela had restructured their entirely obsolete money laundering network, saving the syndicate millions and isolating vulnerabilities they did not even know existed. Right now, however, her eyes were locked on a glowing computer monitor, tracking a highly sophisticated web of shell companies. The heavy oak door to her office clicked open. Daniela did not need to look up to know who it was. Santo Moretti moved with the silent, predatory grace of a panther. He locked the door behind him and walked over to her desk, bringing with him the scent of expensive tobacco, gunpowder, and the crisp autumn air of Lake Michigan. "Working late again, Tesoro?" Santo asked, his deep voice wrapping around her like a heavy, warm blanket. He walked around the desk and placed a small white pastry box next to her keyboard. "I stopped by that bakery in Little Italy you like. The cannolis were fresh." Daniela finally looked up, a genuine smile breaking through her intense concentration. She reached for the box. "You are trying to bribe the auditor, Mr. Moretti. That is highly unethical." Santo leaned against the edge of her desk, his dark eyes sweeping over her with an intensity that still made her breath catch. He wore a tailored charcoal suit with the top two buttons of his shirt undone, revealing the edge of a dark tattoo on his chest. He reached out, his large, scarred hand gently tracing the curve of her jaw, his thumb brushing over her lower lip. "I would give you the entire city if you asked for it, Daniela," he said softly, all traces of the ruthless Mafia Boss vanishing. "You look beautiful tonight. Emerald is your color." Daniela leaned into his touch, her insecurities feeling like a distant lifetime ago. When she first arrived, she had tried to hide her body, ashamed of the space she took up, haunted by the cruel words of people like Celeste. But Santo had systematically dismantled every single one of those fears. He worshipped her softness. He treated her body like a temple, making it violently clear that he found her curves infinitely more desirable than the sharp angles of the women from his past. He made her feel powerful, beautiful, and utterly untouchable. "Thank you," she murmured, taking a bite of the sweet pastry. "But I think I just found something that is going to ruin our evening." Santo's expression instantly shifted. The tender lover disappeared, replaced by the cold, calculating Don of the outfit. "Show me." Daniela turned her monitor so he could see. "I have been digging deeper into the dummy accounts Celeste Stahl was using. After you banished her from Chicago and seized her assets, I assumed the $5 million she skimmed was just greed, but I started tracking the routing numbers she used before we shut her down. The money did not stay in the Cayman Islands. It bounced through 3 different crypto exchanges and landed here." She tapped the screen, highlighting a holding company registered in Delaware. "This company owns a shipping warehouse on the south side," Daniela explained, her voice steady and professional. "But they do not ship anything. I pulled the municipal water and power records. The warehouse is using industrial levels of electricity, way beyond normal lighting. I cross-referenced the property taxes. The silent partner on the deed is Alexei Volkov." Santo went perfectly still. "The Volkov Bratva." "Yes," Daniela said. "Celeste was not just stealing from you, Santo. She was being paid by the Russians to siphon your capital and feed it into their Chicago expansion. The Bratva is using that warehouse as an armory. They are gearing up for a war against you, and Celeste was their inside financier." A dangerous, suffocating silence filled the room. Santo stared at the screen, his jaw clenching so tight, Daniela could hear his teeth grind. The betrayal was deep, but the threat was immediate. The Bratva was vicious, and if they were stockpiling weapons on Moretti territory, they were planning a massive strike. Santo slowly looked down at Daniela. His eyes were entirely black, a void of lethal intent. "You found all this from a dead routing number?" "I know numbers, Santo," Daniela said simply. "They never lie. Volkov is planning to move on your northern territories by the end of the month. The financial projections show a massive cash influx to their lieutenants, scheduled for tomorrow night. They are going to buy off the local politicians and strike." Santo reached down and grabbed her shoulders, pulling her gently up from her chair until she was standing flush against his massive chest. He looked down at her, his expression a mix of absolute awe and terrifying resolve. "You are a weapon, Daniela," he whispered, his lips brushing against her forehead. "They called you a maid. They treated you like dirt. But you are the most dangerous person in this city." "What are you going to do?" she asked, looking up into his dark eyes. Santo pulled a sleek black phone from his pocket. "I am going to remind the Russians why I own Chicago, and I am going to finish what I started with Celeste Stahl. But I need you to do exactly as I say. Tomorrow night, we meet Volkov." "We," Daniela repeated, her heart skipping a beat. "Yes, we," Santo said, his grip on her waist tightening possessively. "You are not a shadow in the background anymore. You are my partner. You are my right hand. Where I go, you go." The private dining room at the back of the St. Clair Steakhouse on Rush Street was usually reserved for corrupt politicians and elite businessmen. Tonight, it was rented out for a parley of absolute carnage. The room was soundproof, lined with dark oak and heavy velvet drapes. Daniela sat to the immediate right of Santo at the long dining table. She wore a tailored black coat over her dress, looking calm and composed, though underneath the table, her hands were trembling slightly. She had a sleek digital tablet resting on her lap. Across from them sat Alexei Volkov, a massive bearded man with prison tattoos crawling up his neck. Flanking him were 4 heavily armed Bratva soldiers. But it was the figure standing in the corner of the room that made Daniela's stomach turn. Celeste Stahl, the former auction house queen, looked nothing like the polished, cruel woman from the penthouse. Her designer clothes were rumpled, her face pale and drawn, trembling like a wet rat. The Bratva had clearly been keeping her as a prisoner since Santo had seized her assets. Santo Moretti sat completely relaxed, a glass of red wine loosely held in his hand. 4 of his deadliest capos stood behind him, their hands resting near their waistbands. "You have crossed a line, Alexei," Santo said, his voice a low, echoing rumble in the quiet room. "You set up armories in my city. You used this pathetic woman to steal from my table." Alexei Volkov laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "It is just business, Santo. Your time is over. The outfit is getting soft. You bring a woman to a sit-down? The Russian sneered, his cold blue eyes locking onto Daniela. I heard rumors you kept the fat maid as a pet. Tell me, does she polish your shoes under the table? The insult hung in the air. 6 months ago, Daniela would have crumbled. She would have looked down, absorbed the humiliation, and wished the floor would swallow her whole. Instead, she calmly picked up her glass of water, took a sip, and looked Alexei dead in the eye. I do not polish shoes, Mr. Volkov, Daniela said, her voice ringing out clear and authoritative. I balance books, which is why I know that as of 3 minutes ago, the Volkov syndicate no longer has the funds to pay its soldiers. Alexei stopped laughing. He narrowed his eyes. What are you talking about, little girl? Daniela placed her tablet on the table and slid it across the polished wood toward him. While you were busy setting up an armory on the south side, you left your digital infrastructure completely exposed. You routed your operational capital through a holding company in Delaware, a company that had a back door tied to Celeste Stahl's original accounts that I now own. Alexei looked down at the tablet. The screen displayed a live feed of the Bratva's offshore bank accounts. The balances were draining in real time, flashing red as millions of dollars were systematically routed into untraceable crypto wallets controlled by the Moretti family. I liquidated your assets, Daniela said, her tone devoid of any mercy. Every bribe you planned to pay tomorrow, every weapon shipment you ordered, every penny you have stolen in Chicago is gone. You are bankrupt. Your men will not fight for a boss who cannot pay them. Celeste gasped from the corner, staring at Daniela in absolute, horrified disbelief. The woman she had called a lumbering cow, the woman she had fired over a dirty rug, had just dismantled an international crime syndicate with a few keystrokes. Alexei's face turned purple with rage. He roared in Russian, reaching for the heavy pistol inside his jacket. You stupid bitch, I will kill you! He never even cleared his holster. Santo moved with the terrifying, explosive violence of a predator unleashed. He kicked the heavy oak dining table straight up, sending glassware and silver crashing into the Bratva soldiers. Before the heavy wood even hit the floor, Santo had drawn his weapon and fired. 2 deafening shots rang out. Alexei Volkov collapsed backward, a clean hole right between his eyes. Chaos erupted. Gunfire shattered the quiet of the room. Daniela ducked, her heart hammering wildly, but she never felt truly afraid. Santos Kapos moved with militaristic precision, neutralizing the remaining Russian guards in a matter of seconds. The heavy scent of cordite and copper filled the air. When the smoke cleared, the room was eerily silent, save for the pathetic whimpering of Celeste Stahl, who had dropped to her knees in the corner, covering her ears. Santo stood amidst the wreckage. He calmly ejected the magazine from his pistol, checked the chamber, and holstered the weapon. He did not even look at the bodies of the men he had just killed. His eyes immediately sought out Daniela. He walked over to her, stepping over broken glass, and knelt in front of her chair. He reached out, his large hands gently framing her face, searching her eyes for any sign of panic. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, his voice thick with adrenaline and fierce concern. "No," Daniela breathed, reaching up to cover his hands with hers. "I am fine." Santo let out a heavy breath, resting his forehead against hers. "You were magnificent," he whispered fiercely. "You destroyed him before I even pulled the trigger." He stood up, pulling Daniela with him. He kept one arm firmly wrapped around her waist, anchoring her to his side. He then turned his attention to the corner of the room. Celeste Stahl was sobbing, her hands clasped together in a desperate plea. Mr. Moretti, please. Please, I had no choice. They forced me. I will do anything. Please let me live. Santo looked at her with utter disgust. You are alive right now only because Daniela requested I do not stain her new dress with your blood. He looked down at Daniela, yielding the floor to her. It was her moment, her justice. Daniela looked at the shivering, pathetic woman who had once made her life a living hell. She did not feel anger anymore. She just felt pity. Ms. Stahl, Daniela said calmly, her voice echoing in the ruined room. You fired me because I did not fit into your perfect, superficial world. You thought I was nothing. But out here, in the real world, survival is not about fitting into a designer dress. It is about intelligence, loyalty, and strength. You have none of those things. Celeste sobbed louder, pressing her face to the floor. Take her to the police station, Daniela instructed one of the capos. Leave the evidence of her embezzlement and her ties to the Russian mob on the detective's desk. Let her rot in federal prison. She is not worth a bullet. The capo nodded respectfully. Yes, lament. He hauled a screaming Celeste to her feet and dragged her out the back door. Santo looked at Daniela, his chest heaving lightly, a slow, immensely proud smile spreading across his handsome face. He pulled her flush against him, not caring about the blood or the chaos around them. He tilted her chin up, his dark eyes burning with raw, unfiltered devotion. You are a queen, Daniela, Santo murmured, his voice incredibly soft despite the violence around them. My queen. My right hand. He crashed his lips down onto hers. The kiss was bruising, possessive, and desperately passionate. It tasted of expensive wine and the promise of absolute power. Daniela kissed him back with equal fervor, her hands gripping the lapels of his suit, pulling him closer. She was no longer the discarded pawn. She was the one moving the pieces on the board. And beside the most dangerous don in Chicago, Daniela Barbieri had finally found exactly where she belonged. Did you love this gritty mafia romance, where the underestimated, brilliant, curvy girl becomes the ultimate underworld queen? If Daniela and Santo's intense, high-stakes journey kept you on the edge of your seat, smash that like button. We want to hear your thoughts on Daniela's epic revenge, so drop a comment below. Do not forget to share this story with your fellow dark romance fans and subscribe to our channel for more thrilling, suspenseful audio dramas every single week.